Assalamu alaikum. Hi everyone. Hope you people have enjoyed a lunch, and now we will have a session, and I will try that you will not fall asleep. So the format is like this. We will have a 10 minutes of discussion or introductory remarks from the panelists about their work and their contribution to the subject, and also at the same time what made them to write about these things after 80 years and the relevancy of it. So we will start our discussion with Pramod Mandade. Over to you to have a brief.
First of all, I would like to begin my presentation thanking organizers for inviting me to be part of this important, probably one of its kind, public conversations on an event that changed the course of our histories and faiths, both public and political as well as personal forever. But also an event is still shrouded in a silence and fear. An event that continues to unfold, cast its long shadow on the present. As in the morning, various speakers spoke about that the violence which was concentrated in Marathwada and Hyderabad, Karnataka. I come from that region, so I am going to. I come from that region, particularly the place called Latur. Paul Corrington, a scholar of memory and violence, evocatively states, quote, "Our experience of present largely depends on our knowledge of past," unquote. I begin this statement not just to draw obvious connection that we know are built into the shape our presence. That is how past is always contemporary. But what I want to highlight here is the use of phrase, the knowledge of our past. As I get on with my brief presentation, I want to just trace my own personal trajectory, engaging with the subject to highlight these connections between past, present, and our knowledge about it. I come from a city of Latur in Marathwada, which was a part of erstwhile Hyderabad princely state, as a young scholar who moved to city of Bombay to pursue engineering. From a first time step outside of Marathwada, the stark disparity between two places really struck me. One of the questions that continuously emerged is the backwardness of Marathwada, which was attributed to the princely past, occupied my mind. This led me to engage extensively with the historical material in Marathi about region. At the same time, I came across series of articles written by A.G. Nurani on communalism, nationalism, Hyderabad in Frontline magazine. These articles preceded his seminal work on destruction of Hyderabad. In one of those articles, titled The Untold Massacre, he mentioned about Latur. Latur was one of the epicenter of violence. He wrote, quoting Sundarlal, that the city of Latur were about 10,000 Kachi Muslims, of whom only 3,000 remain after police action. About 1,000 of them were killed. I encountered this piece of information with utter shock and disbelief. Probably, if it was written by someone else, I might have just dismissed it by thinking that it must be a propaganda. After reading piece, I tried to pursue more detail on history, was met with a complete silence within Marathi literature and public sphere. During one of my visit to home, I just mentioned this subject to my grandmother, while other family members just dismissed that something like this ever happened or recounted the stereotypical narratives about Razakar violence we had already grown up listening to. My grandmother instantly responds, I quote, "Yes, lot of people attacked Muslims. It was a time of kapakapi. I was traveling from my mother's home to my sasural. I still remember a stench of half-burned rotten flesh that filled in the air. For an entire distance I traveled, I didn't remove my pallu or my nose even for a minute," unquote. It was my grandmother's knowledge of the past that led me to begin engagement with this topic. My initial questions guided the encounter with such stunning silence over the history of such large scale of violence. As a young boy growing up in Marathwada, we were taught about the history of anti-Nizam struggle, violence of Razakars, and annual celebration of 17 September as a liberation day. The initial question that guided my research were then engaged with the question of this silence. Complete absence of any written material on this subject meant that one had to explore the oral history. I began my fieldwork in Aurangabad in year 2014. I was again met with a silence when I began to approach various elders of the community in city. In one of those meetings, an elderly Muslim man in his 90s, as I asked him that I want to know the story of police action. He said to me, I quote, "ये कहानी नहीं है, ये आप बीती है." And then he completely refused to share further. In another encounter, somebody else asked me to work on another topic. गड़े मुर्दे क्यों उखाड़ते हो? गालिब पे काम करो. In an English public sphere, very little material was available, centered around Sundarlal report. While the report has been one of the most important source of evidence of the time, it was baffling that story began and ended with the Sundarlal report. Most of the scholarly work actually talks about Sundarlal report, including very seminal work of Omar Khalid. I was sure that this huge scale massacre will find other registers of memory, institutional and otherwise, whether intentionally or unintentionally. It was clear then, in order to retrieve this silence, buried past, we had to learn to listen intently, read between the lines within those silence. Turning my gaze to state archives and newspaper records, I found much has been recorded in those documents. To give you an example, a census report of 1952 record 13 Muslim majority towns whose population declined drastically from even their population recorded in 1941. There is no explanation given for such a deep decline. No famine or drought or disease was responsible for this unnatural number. One can recover a lot of evidence of the massacre by reading into institutional silence. In a correspondence between various government functionaries and political leaders, one finds more open mention of violence. Nehru, for instance, in one of his letters writes about his visit in Usmanabad 1952, quote, "These events were far more serious than most people had imagined. In Usmanabad and some other areas, there are large number of Muslim widows and children. There is practically," just 1 minute. "There is practically no Muslim man left in the area because they all are killed soon after police action. The event itself was rather horrible, but the consequences pursued us still. Not much has been done, even it tried to help and rehabilitate poor sufferers," unquote. To be noted here that Nehru wrote this in a private correspondence with Rajendra Prasad. There was again complete public silence over the matter. As non-Muslim researcher who met with limitations in access, I turned to the Hindus and Dalits to engage with the history, because they are also witness of the same moment. Interestingly, again among the Dalits of the region are not actively engaging in hiding this past. The Hindus are engaged in active effect of building counter narrative. The 17th September being one of its manifestation. Within the Hindu discourse, there are two versions that emerge. Both acknowledge the violence, although they may undermine intensity of it. First version claims that the violence was in a reaction to the Razakars and has narrative of equal and opposite reaction. The second version is that how they say good innocent Muslims. Even they remain silent why they needed a saving in the first place. Therefore, maintaining silence over the fact of massacre. Over a period of time, as more people open up, I'll take 2 more. Over a period of time, as more people open up, I persisted with the fieldwork. I realized that silence was a misguided framework. With the time, I could see that the police action or action sakal, as they say in Marathwada, fills in a very air of entire region. The number of places that were changed, in various memorials, museums that have been erected, in the statues of Patel that dot the towns of Marathwada, the very different mental maps of a same town that the Muslims and non-Muslim residents occupy, the violence that past makes present known. One of the example of the spatial register of this memory are the wells in rural areas. In the drought-stricken landscape of Marathwada, water sources are important life-giving sites. I came across several old wells that were filled with the water even year after year, but continue to remain unused. When asked about it, they said these are Murdad wells, meaning these wells were once filled with a corpse during the action and cannot be used. I want to end this presentation with the two things. First thing is the story of a Gandhi Baba fair. Every year, the fair that takes place in one of the villages in Marathwada called Ujaid. Every year from 20th January onwards, a news about Gandhi Baba's Jatra of Ujaid occupies prominent space in a local newspapers. The report repeatedly emphasized that generally fairs are held in the name of God, goddesses, sons, but Gandhi Baba's Jatra is one such fair in country held after Mahatma Gandhi. On 24 January, in a festive mode, Gandhi's bust was brought in procession from the Gram Panchayat office. It was installed in the middle of the village on an elevated platform in front of Maruti temple. The January 26th, Republican Day, is the main day of a Jatra. After hosting a national flag in front of a Gandhi statue, school children take out the procession with Gandhi's image throughout the whole village. The people worship the Gandhi statue like the tomb in Dargah or idols in temples. They pray, offer him sweet. Hundreds of people from neighboring villages attend the fair. The wrestling competition, circus, tamasha are the main attractions of the people. Following the foundation story of the fair appear in a various newspaper with little bit of difference. Story appears as the fairs are important because they bring happiness, enthusiasm, and some change in everyday life of the people. Villagers decide to start the fair. There was no agreement over the name of the fair. Then the freedom fighter, Shivling Swami, was the first Sarpanch elected representative of Ujaid. He suggested Gandhi's name with no one objected. The villagers also decide to hold the fair on a Republican Day. So the fair of Gandhi Baba continued without interruption from 1952 onwards. Some of these reports passingly refer to the police action and Hindu-Muslim conflict suggest that villages creatively and symbolically intervene Gandhi's fair to resolve tension between communities. I visited this village. The huge arch welcomes you at the entrance of the Ujaid. On both sides of arch, there is an old school. The nameplate of the school attracts my attention as there was a suffix written in the bracket he after the name of village Ujaid. I noticed that few shops nameplates were also has the same suffix after the name of the village. When I asked about the suffix, local people explained that older name of the village was Hisamabad. Some people use first name in the brackets. Later, when I met elderly man from a Muslim community and asked regarding renaming of the village name, he laughed, took me to the Gram Panchayat building, where on the board name of the village was written Hisamabad. Then he pointed towards the government school board, which was in front of Panchayat office. It has also named Hisamabad. Then he said, I quote, the unofficial name of the village is still Hisamabad, but people called it Ujaid. This man was of 15-year-old when police action happened. Further he said, there are peers in our village. Previously an annual fair of peers was held, but was called off after police action. For 3 or 4 years, Hindus attempted to revive the fair in the name of God Mahadev. But for some reason it never gained traction. We also didn't participate in it. Then they started fair in the name of Gandhi Baba, which attracted lot of attention due to its novelty. The second thing which I want to speak about and end this presentation, in Marathwada there are a lot of oral songs. We called it OV. It's a grind mill songs. Women used to sing in the early morning. It was their domestic space. And free from a male gaze and other things. So there are many people who worked on these OVs. There is a scholar called Kunda Jagdade. She thought she should also try and collect the Muslim women who used to sing this song, what they sing and all those. So she collected all these songs and then she compared with what Hindus are singing. So most of these songs she found out that they sing similarly, like they sing about their Maike, they sing about their sister, father. Most of them are more or less same. But she stuck that, why is that Muslim women are singing songs of death in the early morning? She didn't knew that. She didn't has an explanation to it. The explanation was a police action. From her collection, I want to end with a 2 songs. One is sung by the Hindu woman. They say it's about police action. Ala ala rangada la sakli, zali Hindula mukadi. It's about a tank. When in Indian military action, when it called entered with a tank left the very mark on a people's mind. And she's talking about police action, and she says, "Zali Hindula mokali, sakali zali Hindula mokali." It came to liberate Hindus. It tells what was it. The second song I want to sing and end is, so what is the police action violence and how does it, what is their impact? For a long period of time, women didn't allow their children to go out and play. There was always fear about it. So this song is sung by the Muslim woman. She says, "Tana mera khele, gali chhod ke par gali. Usko rakhe Maula Ali." This is in 1960s and 70s. Till 1960s and 70s, they didn't allow to go outside. Fear of violence. Thank you very much.
Intense. So we'll have another session, another talk by Danish Majid. He comes from a background of both regional and also international. So he's bringing up the perspective both from the national and international.
Thank you. Thank you, Pramod. That was very interesting to hear the Marathwada perspective. And thank you, Gayas, and thank you to the SIO कि आप लोग ये program मुनक़िद करें, क्योंकि ये discourse बहुत कम रहता, even in more mainstream, quote unquote mainstream gatherings. 48 के बारे में ये जो गुफ्तगू हो रही बहुत कम जगह होती है. So thank you guys to the SIO. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया. जो शुरू में जो एक स्पीच थी डॉक्टर अमीन जाफरी साहब की, I got to catch a little bit of that. So, and it was very interesting to see the more macro level aspect of police action, क्योंकि पहले से ही पुलिस एक्शन के बारे में डिस्कोर्स है ही नहीं, और अगर जब भी कुछ बात होती तो very high level figures, निज़ाम, नेहरू, Patel, Qasim Razvi, and these guys were very important characters in this saga. However, police action सिर्फ उन से ही नहीं हुआ. Ultimately, it's the people on the ground who suffered. And that's the thing, वो ground level stories ज़्यादा नहीं है. Back in 2017, 2016 से partition के बारे में बहुत सारे stories आते हैं. If anybody is well, A.G. Nurani, I think Pramod अभी आप Nurani साहब का जिक्र करें, उनकी किताब Destruction of Hyderabad में the prologue उन्होंने क्या बोलते हैं पुलिस एक्शन के बारे में? That police action was the third act of a tragedy that engulfed the Indian subcontinent during 47 and 48. पहला था पंजाब, नॉर्थ इंडिया, बंगाल, सिंध के राइट्स. सेकंड 47-48 कश्मीर वॉर, और आखिर में पुलिस एक्शन. So on a very micro level, we are seeing some distortions of history as well, both from the powers that be, but at the same time सिर्फ powers that be, सिर्फ साहिब इख्तिदार की भी गलती नहीं है इसमें. थोड़े कुछ there are also people who and usually you find these people overseas a lot, और वो भी Facebook groups पे ज़्यादा ही मिलते हैं. One clue I'll give is that they dispense a lot of pearls of history. So maybe some people will get that reference. But Hyderabad was not exactly the utopia that people make it out to be. वहाँ पे अमीन जाफरी साहब का भी लेक्चर थोड़ा सुना था मैं अभी के कुछ पस्त अक़वाम के लोग भी उठे. अब सिर्फ लोग ग्रांटेड आउटसाइड इन्फ्लुएंसेस भी रहते ऐसे बगावतों में, चाहे वो महाराजा हरी सिंह के खिलाफ जो हिंदू हुक्मरान थे, या उस्मान अली खान. वी कैन डिबेट कौन और जालिम थे, कौन जालिम थे. श्योर, लेट्स हैव दैट डिबेट. बट एट द सेम टाइम, whether it's these narratives coming out from the powers that be, or certain people जो हैदराबाद से अपना नाता छोड़ दिए, सिर्फ ओवरसीज में शेरवानी, रूमी टोपी पहन के दावतों में जाते, that also is not exactly the full picture that's being painted. और I think this is why I think micro-histories बोल के एक concept है. जो अमीन जाफरी साहब बोले, that was a very micro level for the most part, which is needed of course. But I think it's time for micro-histories as well to come out. Basically, बड़े सवाल छोटे जगहों में पूछना है. वो बड़े साहिब इख्तिदार के ऐवान में लोगों पे क्या बीती है, चाहे वो हैदराबाद का मुसलमान हो, मराठवाड़े के कुछ लोग जो रजाकार के तशद्दुद का शिकार भी थे, या वो लोग जो इंडियन मिलिट्री या दूसरे पॉलिटिकल फैक्शंस के भी शिकार हुए थे. ये स्टोरीज बाहर आने चाहिए. But that's the thing. हैदराबाद में अब when it comes to police action, जो फर्स्ट हैंड स्टोरीज जो ये माइक्रो लेवल हिस्ट्रीज दे सकते, I think within the next 5 to 10 years वो oral first hand stories निकालना मुश्किल होगा. अयूब अंकल, I believe he was on a panel as well. उन्होंने मेरे को बोलते थे, दानिश जल्दी ये स्टोरीज निकाल लो बुजुर्गों से, नहीं तो बिना नोटिस दिए चले जाते हैं उन लोग. बात तो सही है. It's very very true. And the thing is, a lot of these, sometimes with these buzurg log, the memories are very traumatic, so they won't be as forthcoming. But on the other hand, kabhi they'll be very open and happy to talk about what happened. Because अरे कोई तो at least बात कर रहा है हमसे. And as it is, they're lonely, a lot of these old people. आजकल के ज़माने में time is money, and बुजुर्गों को they like talking, they like taking their time to actually talk about the past. But जो मेरी किताब है, इसका उन्वान है Hyderabadis from police action to present day. I got a lot of different perspectives from the people. मसलन अमीन जाफरी साहब PDF के बारे में बात करें. It's through my reportage or through this book or through research from this book I realized PDF जो है, PDF was the leftist factions जो हैदराबाद में elections contest करें, क्योंकि नेहरू साहब चाहते थे कि हैदराबाद में भी एक हिज़्ब इख्तिलाफ रहना in the form of the left. उससे ही मालूम हुआ था मेरे को कि लेफ्ट जो हेल्प करा 48 के बाद मुसलमानों को या हिंदुओं को वो ट्रेजेडी से रिकवर होने में वो बहुत बड़ा रोल है. और वो भी that's even a macro level that's very a macro level aspect of police action. वो भी post police action specifically. लेकिन वो लोगों को ज़्यादा मालूम नहीं रहता. So this is why we need to get these stories, especially when some of these elders are around. और बाइनरीज जो डिस्ट्रॉय होते हैं ऐसे माइक्रो हिस्ट्रीज से, when you deviate from diasporas और स्टेट लेवल नैरेटिव्स या even very popular narratives जो स्टेट भी नहीं निकाला हो या डायस्पोरास भी नहीं निकाले हो, बाइनरीज डिस्ट्रॉय होते हैं. तो there were two तेलंगाना के तेलुगु फैमिलीज का भी इंटरव्यू करा मैं, जो 48 के भी वाक़यात हुए उनके साथ. लेकिन as we know वो जो तेलंगाना स्ट्रगल हुआ, पीपल से अरे आंध्रा कॉलोनियल डिस्पेंसेशन था, हॉगिंग ऑफ रिसोर्स, which is true as well, ये इससे कोई बैर नहीं है. लेकिन एक चीज़ जो मैं सीखा हूँ ये कुछ लोगों से जो 60s और 70s और 80s के दौर में ये सरगर्मियाँ देखे, कि आंध्रा पीपल, that might be one side to the political establishment, the business class, but at the same time NTR के दौर में जो communal riots हुए थे बहुत कंट्रोल करा. And that's one thing that NTR is to be praised for. बहुत सारे बुजुर्गों का ये भी मानना है कि NTR did a good job with keeping communal harmony at its best. So now I'll get back to first-hand stories, back from the first-hand stories to police action. एक first-hand story में निकाला था, उमर फारूक खादरी बोल के आपके एक SIO के member हैं. उनकी ग्रैंड आंट से मैं बात कर रहा था. शी इज़ फ्रॉम लातूर, वेयर प्रमोद ऑल्सो हेल्स फ्रॉम. एंड जब इंडियन मिलिट्री उनके घर में आके घर में आए, मारना शुरू करे उन लोगों को, शी बेसिकली कॉल्ड देम अंग्रेज़ा. तो अंग्रेज़ा बोले थे उनको. एंड आई फाउंड दैट फैसिनेटिंग, क्योंकि वाला अंग्रेज़ा तो कब के चले गए 47 में, तो 48 में वापस कैसे आ गए हैदराबाद में. बट फॉर हर अंग्रेज़ का मतलब था बाहर वाले जो हैदराबाद के नहीं है, क्योंकि टेक्निकली हैदराबाद देखा जाए तो नॉमिनली स्पीकिंग वाज इंडिपेंडेंट. व्हाइल दैट वाज फैसिनेटिंग, द थिंग इज उमर फारूक खादरी के जो ग्रैंड आंट है, शी इज नो लॉन्गर विद अस, गॉड ब्लेस हर सोल, व्हिच अगेन स्ट्रेसेस माय पॉइंट दैट ये लोग जिनके जो एक रिपोजिटरीज थे अपने ही अंदर में, they are slowly disappearing. It's the kind of way to put it. Which is why अगर कोई पुलिस एक्शन पे काम करना चाह रहे, और करना भी चाहिए, जल्दी करो. That's plainly stated. You have to do it right away. क्योंकि अब 5 साल में, जैसा अयूब अंकल बोले, बिना नोटिस दिए उन लोग चले जाएंगे. So my advice for a lot of you storytellers, or I see a lot of potential storytellers right here, is get the police action stories. But I think another avenue for a lot of bilingual people, and I believe SIO में bilingualism पे ज़्यादा जोर दिया जाता, क्योंकि मौदूदी साहब भी बोले थे अपने आखिरी खिताब में कि सिर्फ उर्दू से अपना काम वाबस्ता मत करो. Don't keep your work dependent on Urdu. दावा के लिए दूसरे ज़बाना भी सीखना, कि मद्रास के खिताब में था I believe. तो that's why I'm saying कि पुलिस एक्शन का रखिए जिसमें उर्दू बहुत काम आएगा. लेकिन I think 69 का जो स्ट्रगल है तेलंगाना का, I think आप SIO वालों को खुसूसन bilingualism आपकी बहुत काम आएंगी, क्योंकि तेलुगु people who spoke a lot of Telugu were mostly at the forefront of what happened in 69. So on that note, I'll just end it by saying, keep finding these stories, keep telling them. Agar kuch madad bhi chahiye in crafting them, I'm here. Please do get a hold of me after this conference. And I look forward to hearing more stories from the audience as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Malik, for yet another job for us for 1960s. So we'll have the next panelist, Khurram Murad, who happens to be my friend, also member of the SIO, and we will be talking about his personal family story about the police action, and we will have that with the pillar of trust.
Sorry, bear with me.
In between. Okay, Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon. So what I'm going to tell you is a burden for you to listen to this. So you should have the heart and the mind and the ears to hear. Since morning, we've been listening to the history of what has happened during 1948. But this documentary as well, it is telling one of that stories of what has happened in 1948. So we can play it, right? Yeah. So first we'll have a look at the trailer which is going to release. And then,
Very short trailer.
It's a very short trailer. Why say control? So, like I said, since morning we've been listening to different aspects, reimagining politics around Hyderabad 1948, Muslim question. But I want to draw your attention towards the importance of memory of those who have witnessed the violence and repression. I mean, it almost seemed like since morning everybody was mentioning police violence and then taking a jump and then talking about something else, or something else as in what has transpired after or before that, but not about the ghost, right? Now I want you to hold to the word ghost with me, because that is important. That ghost is in the room, that ghost is me, that ghost is that documentary. You have to hold to this word. Now, just to tell you what prompted the idea or what was the journey of making the film, how it started. As a child, like I said, this ghost was always around us. My grandmother she used to meet women. They are not relatives. ये रिश्तेदार नहीं हमारे. लेकिन घर पे आते थे, दादी उनसे बैठ रही हैं, बात कर रही हैं, and they are talking. And they are talking as if about something that I am not aware of or we do not know about. And there is a strange solidarity between these women that they have. कुछ जगहों के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, कुछ लोगों के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, कुछ events के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, which I have no idea. Though I am living in the same house, I am born in that house, I don't know these people. Who are these women who are coming and meeting as if there is a secret council of women happening, and then one is curious. So that happens. And then as a child, I was in 7th grade, there was a curfew in the town, some clash during some procession. So the auto came and they took us from an alternate route behind the graveyard and like this, and then we reached home. Happens. I think it's a common story that all of us might have felt in some part of their life. Then my grandmother, the moment we all came in, entered the house, she's like, "Aage, sab log sukun se aage, what happened? Action ho raha kya? Police action ho raha kya? Police action ho raha kya?" It just, then you hear it again in moments like these. Now, very recently, CA and RC violence happened. And there is also this naked, vulgar projection of violence, right? Given that we live in the age where you see violence like what we are seeing in Gaza and Palestine right now. So we kind of, so at that time, that was 24/7, that whole Shaheen Bagh and Jamia violence, AMU violence was happening. And then she says, what are they doing to these children? These are student kids. Are they doing action on them? Is police action happening again? So these memory, it is never too far out of reach. The ghost is always in the room. They have to touch it and it will be real. It's almost as near as that for them, right? So this memory is not too far out of reach of their present. Now, when did she started retelling this story? When, of course, after police, when she said that certainly after CNRC, then of course one is curious, and then COVID happened, and then I started asking about her, like, what had happened? You always mentioned that there is this action, police action, so what had actually happened? Then she starts telling one story after the other, and then every story more gruesome than the another. And after those series of that whole week, now I don't know, one starts questioning their own self, as in, what we are the, what do you say, we are the reminiscent of that memory. We are the generation who have been obliviated by these watchdogs of memory, who are standing between us, this present, who are standing between this tranquil, this secured present, and then behind them is that beast, that ghost, that naked, vulgar violence of military action of 1948. So one tends to think in those terms. But like I said, it was not a very newer thing. That feeling of haunting was always there in the moments like when she's telling if there is a little curfew, and then she suddenly, as if she's trying to gather, like a bird, she's trying to, cover her nest from the predators, things like that. So now, I'm not saying that just because I've asked her these questions and I know this knowledge, now I have this poisonous knowledge we are discussing, not in the right term of the word, but in the gruesomeness of it. Now what do I do with it, or what it has done, or what it has been doing to us without our knowledge? Even not knowing that something has happened, there is certain sense of insecurity or the engagement that we have with the state. The way, I just want you all to think the way Muslims in Deccan, be it Hyderabad, Gulbarga, Baso Kalyan, Latu, Nanded, what is our interaction with the state in that sense? We are very compromising in nature. We are very, all our efforts we never intervene or interrogate. We never are in the position to kind of interrogate. We can't stand as equal because, if you look back a little carefully, you'd see that those roots, that kind of trauma is begetting from the violence of 1948. So, but one thing that after listening to these events, and then I was thinking, how can she be the same person who was stitching kurtas for me on Eid? She knows these 100 recipes. She's a different, now there's a whole new imagination of that self in front of me and of my own self after knowing what she has gone through. But does that change anything? Do they become these sudden valorizing heroes for me? Do they become, is it a different image for me on just after knowing this knowledge? And I see them, they have not lived with this constant, they have not lived sobbing all the time. There were festivals, I remember, one of the stories of my grandmother's mother, so she's one of the leading, she was one of the leading women who were, while they were escaping the violence. So my memory of her, there was a wedding, one of our cousins' wedding, and she was playing this dholak. You might all know in weddings we play dholak ke geet. So she was playing for 1 hour, and then her hands were all red, like numb because of playing. And then we all have that fond memory of her, that, oh, what a happy woman, like she's all celebratory about life. But knowing after the events that has gone, what she has gone through, one realizes that one has lived through those events of violence. One has survived that and made a life out of it. So I see, as much as this is story of gruesome violence and exploitation of lives, and it is also story of survival. It is also story of hope, and it is also story of happiness. And one needs to, I think the reason why every work on police action or 1948 becomes important is because these interventions will open new dimensions of understanding these selves, how Muslim bodies, how these people who are survived and these generations, second, third generation, how they've embodied these traces and shards of violence, right? So more, I think, hopefully when the documentary will be released, there can be more to discuss about it. But before ending, I just want to tell you a small anecdote, and just to make a point that how these memories are kind of, they run in your blood. When I learned that my grandmother's brother was slaughtered by the goons, long story short, goons enter, they kill this 16-year-old boy, and then my grandmother's mother, she's holding the boy in her arms. It's a dead boy whose throat is, his throat is just cut and he's bleeding. So the mother goes and holds the boy, and she puts her hand on the bleeding scar, and then she says, but the boy dies. So this happens, and after that event, for 3 months, I think that was one of the stories in the trailer that you saw, the snippet. After 3 months of that event, she was in the same bloodied sari. She did not bath. She was in this one kind of, the way her body was dealing with that, the way she was dealing with that trauma was she did not take her clothes off, and then she was in that same attire, that bloodied attire, for 3 months, and her hair had developed knots, and there were maggots kind of situation that was happening because of the dirt and because of the state she was in. And later, I learned through these, I mean, these stories complement each other. If Pramod is interviewing one person, if I go and find another person, there are, like, when we talk about things, there are like so many similarities, as in that kind of substantiates the event and the gruesomeness of what has happened. So when I went to another sister of my grandmother, she narrated me the same event, but she added this. I mean, the reason I'm saying that, the way these memories are retold, they are impregnated with more information than that has actually transpired in real life. Now, what I mean by that is, when I went to the other sister, she said, भाई को मारे, भाई को काटे, भाई को काटने के बाद ऐसा भाई गुंडे पकड़ रहे थे, तो भाई क्या करा, पुकारा, अम्मा अम्मा छुपा लो छुपा लो छुपा लो मेरे को, 9 महीने कैसा पेट में छुपा के रखे थे, छुपा लो। तो अम्मा जाके बच्चे को ऐसा खींच रहे हैं, गुंडे वहाँ से खींच रहे हैं, बच्चे को खींच रहे हैं, एंड देन शी पुट्स हर आंचल, जो पल्लो है, वो उसके सर पे डाल दिए, बच्चे के छुपाने की, लाइक उसको पकड़ के खींच लिया अपने पास, एंड देन द गून कम्स एंड ही स्लॉटर्स द थ्रोट. दिस हैपेंस. And I mean, going into how these events have later in their life, they have dreams about these events and things like that. So when I learned this, so now this is in my knowledge, and I'm part of this family, and of course this is also adding up to certain imagination of your own self. So we were traveling to Baswa Kalyan for this work. We were sitting in the bus, and my co-director and cinematographer, he was also there. I said, I can't come. You somehow take me there. We are sitting in the bus. I said, somehow take me there. There is no capacity that I can climb this bus and go back. Because the way these events kind of unfolds within you, and this is where I might be drifting and drawing too much attention towards the transcendental aspect of it, but it is nonetheless, one can't discount it. So I write poetry sometimes. And then I was thinking, I mean, I don't know what to do. Should I name this as a panic attack? Should I name this as, one can't hold it together or whatever? And I said, okay, let me write. I mean, it'll be fine. And then there's something that I wrote, and then later I read it to my grandmother. But I think you need to, the reason why this piece I'm reading out to you is because I think, like I said, the way memories are imagined and told, and the way they are registered in one's mind, how they add a certain, how they add to the information of the violence itself. So it's in Dakhini, and this is actually a dream that my great grandmother, that means my mother of my grandmother, who saw that the child came in her dream. वही बच्चा इकबाल मामू जो ख्वाब में आए थे उनके, and then he was comforting her basically. He said, अम्मा रो नको, कहीं को परेशान हो रहा है. And this has happened 3-4 months after the actual event. Okay, he said, आप रो रहे कहीं को, it'll be fine. मैं ठीक हूँ, बस मेरे को यहाँ पर हाथ मत लगाओ. This is what the boy said in the dream. And this has been confirmed by the other sisters also. Now that simple information of what has happened, it kind of had stayed with me, and then also I think this poem would be an act of mourning for these people. रोने वालों से कहो उनका भी रोना रो लें जिनको मजबूरी हालात में रोने ना दिया. So you need to, so it's so हम रोने वाले हैं तो उनका रोना रो रहे हैं. So you have to listen to that. अम्मा पानी कैको नहीं नहाते तुम्हें, आँखें सूखते न सुरमा लगाते तुम्हें, बालों में लट्टियां बन रही देखो, गवां भट्टियां के सर का जल रहे देखो, ना बातां करते ना गले से लगाते तुम्हें, ना आंचल में मंजे छुपाते तुम्हें, पूरा कौसर का पानी सुख रहे कते, साकी पिलाते पिलाते थक रहे कते. कौन सोचा था ऐसा भी रोना रहता है, घुट को मरने का जीना सलीका रहता है, लहू में लिपटा सो जोड़ा काढ़ो जरा, यूसुफ का गल्ला फटे सीवन मारो जरा. Okay? Yeah. So that'll be my time. Hopefully we'll have more discussion.
Thanks, Khurram. Men die, women suffers. This is the story of women's struggle, the massacre of the whole family members, how did the women survive, and then the progeny continues. So we are open for the discussion. We'll start our questions. Our conversation with first with Pramod. Pramod, you talked about silence. Silence as a protest, or silence as a, there was an action in noun, not in the verb, police action. So there was a reaction also. Was there a reaction, a silence? Silence was a reaction, or because from 80 years you didn't find a proper piece for that. Instead, the renowned scholars have worked on it, but the parties to that violence or the sufferers or the perpetrators, they didn't talk about that.
Hi, thanks Murad. Yeah. So perpetrators spoke about it. They also spoke in terms of an. I mentioned when I was saying that there are two ways in which they spoke, with a lesser intensity. One story which one hears every time from an Hindu part of a story is, we save all our neighbors. We kept them in a kangi. Kangi is a place where you store grains. We hide them for months, but we save them. But nobody tells that what is the reason why you needed to save them. Nobody tells that what happened to not good Muslim. So only good Muslim is a Garib Muslim. Garib is a very, it has a class notion as well as who wouldn't ask you a question. A man who couldn't ask you a question. So we saved those Muslims. So there is, that story is there. Even in a literature when we read out, they speak about violence much loudly. There is no hiding part of violence against Muslim. Like I can tell you, I have collected for years, I have collected how 17th September has been written in Marathi newspapers. One of this newspaper, they spoke how this newspaper went and spoke to a freedom fighter. We call them in people who fought against, there is a term in Marathi we call Swatantra Sainik. So they went and spoke on what they did. So they openly say that we killed all the Razakar and feel this well. There is openness to that, but they say it's a Razakar. The other part of a story I just in with a Dalit, the story is much more interesting and much more complicated too. Dalits are the one who spoke with very openly, where the Muslims are killed, very innocent Muslims are killed, and as the nature of gruesome violence, the scale of that violence is also they spoke a lot. But a very interesting way they spoke about, this appears in their autobiography, this incident appears, only this incident. So you don't know what happened to them after or before. So this incident appears to portray the Hindus as a violent, because they want to talk about their own oppression. So they use this event, but they speak about it.
So over to Danish about the migration, because when we talk about Police Action 1948, so we find that Nizam's cabinet or the elites of the Hyderabad, his advisors were more, the politics has fallen into the, I would say the disturbance in Hyderabad was used as a leverage to the Pakistan's interest, because the kind of conversation that was happening within the cabinet. So it was like the Hyderabadis cabinet were talking about merger or to be independent, and there was a correspondence with the Pakistani elites how this accession or the pause on the accession would leverage the Pakistan in the international affairs. So what I have been trying to understand, how did this happen? It was avoidable, but did the elite of Hyderabad or the cabinet of Nizam has lost that sight? Now coming to that conversation about the migration also, why? It's because there was a discussion about mulki rule in the morning. So there was a mulki and non-mulki. These advisors were also part of that non-mulki, or they were the mulkis, because mulkis stayed back and most of the non-mulkis migrated again back to the America or to the Pakistan. So can you explain on that migration story? Again, this migration continues to the Western countries also, in 1970s also, like Hyderabadi Muslims migrated to the West also. So I want to talk, just to give us an idea about migration to escape from this violence, or migration for the economic development.
Excellent questions, bunch of them actually. First, आप पाकिस्तान का जिक्र करें तो उसका थोड़ा पस मंजर दे देता हूँ मैं. तो the Nizam's cabinets had a lot of people from what today is Pakistan. Ghulam Muhammad का अगर कोई नाम सुने, Mahindra जो jeeps आज है, it was actually at first Mahindra and Muhammad. Ghulam Muhammad जो थे बड़े businessman थे, सनतकार थे West Punjab के. West Punjab meaning pre 1947 United Punjab. The western part of pre-1947 United Punjab. So he served as finance minister in the cabinet of the Nizam, of the Hyderabad government. And Mir Lai Khali jo the prime minister, जो आखिरी सदर आज़म थे हैदराबाद के, उन्होंने भी पाकिस्तान के लिए थोड़े कुछ डिफेंस के कुछ काम शुरू कर दिए थे. He basically tried to कुछ वफद लेके गए थे, कुछ to get to the United States to procure some defense supplies. तो वो पाकिस्तान का तो connection पहले से था. And you were saying about the interests. क्योंकि सरदार पटेल क्या बोले थे? What did he say about, if anybody remembers what he said about Hyderabad, an ulcer in India. Hyderabad के पेट में नासूर था. He said something along those lines. And it wasn't just Hyderabad that was used to, that Pakistan wanted to leverage for its interest. Sirf Azad Hyderabad nahi tha. Travancore was also one state that Muhammad Ali Jinnah wanted to keep independent. Kyunki strategic. East Pakistan agar hai, you have not, India is not encircled, but there's a frontier against India. And then Pet mein wo jo Nasur jo Sardar Patel crudely defined. Granted, he might not have had the best intentions, but he was right. And फिर Travancore side पे. So I think this is one thing that a lot of these advisors of the Nizams, चाहे वो मुल्की हो या non-मुल्की, they have definitely, they wanted to, they were definitely in cahoots with Pakistan on this. So that's ये पस मंजर देना चाह रहा था मैं आपको, especially वो माइग्रेशन की बात आप जो बोले. 48 के बाद बहुत सारे लोग पाकिस्तान भी गए थे. Even my grandfather, I think, you said you had a grandmother.
Yes.
आप लोग के भी like मेरे दादा जो थे उन्होंने औरंगाबाद में पोस्टेड थे सिटी के प्योर सिटी. I mean जो दारुसलाम जो है वो जो कृष्णा अपार्टमेंट्स जो है that was my ancestral home at one time. लेकिन 46 में उन्होंने औरंगाबाद में पोस्ट हुए थे. And that's also quite a story which I'll be telling in my book as well. वो जो कहानी जो in which he narrowly escaped death. अगर कोई वो शो नार्कोस देखा पहले when the guys are lined up and shot, literally that's kind of what happened with my grandfather. वो लाइन में शूट करे but he somehow got out. He somehow bullet missed him and then he made his way back to Hyderabad. तो people like him they considered migration क्योंकि अब निज़ाम की सरकार नहीं है. अब जो मोनोपोली जो था मुसलमानों का more or less, और I'm not saying I'm saying this quoting उमर खालिदी की किताब हैदराबाद आफ्टर द फॉल में लिखा हुआ है नियर मोनोपोली था गवर्नमेंट जॉब्स पे मुसलमानों के. ऑफ कोर्स दे वो co-opted कायस्थ, ब्रह्मो खत्री, lot of Brahmins and certain other Hindu folks who were a part of the government machinery. वो जो गम जो था that was one of the major reasons पाकिस्तान को माइग्रेशन बहुत सारे लोग कंसिडर कर रहे थे. मेरे दादा almost went too. तो that's another part of the migration जो post police action बहुत सारे लोग कंसिडर करें right after police action. लेकिन जो सबसे ऊंचा तबका था वो लोग UK भी बहुत सारे गए थे. A lot of them went to the UK as well. And lastly वो जो आप बोले थे there was another aspect of migration जो post 50s करके भी कभी बोले थे गल्फ का जो migration हुआ. And I think खुर्रम आप resilience की बात कर रहे थे अभी and you know how tragedies affect people कैसा रहता है उनके साथ. तो I think वो जो गल्फ का migration हुआ maybe I'm saying this too much from a city perspective but I'm sure district से भी बहुत हुआ गल्फ का migration. वो जो वापस revival हुआ मुसलमानों का खुसूसन Gulf को जाके, I mean, even Hindus all over India went to you know earn money in riyals. वो जो oil के dollars और oil का पैसा जो आ रहा था. तो sometimes when 67, I mean 50s से लेके 70s का दौर गम का दौर था और survival का भी दौर था. So जब 70s में Gulf को जाना शुरू है बहुत सारे लोग, that's when people रियालों में कमा के लाए और recover हुए. But at the same time, that kind of brought back a lot of those feudal excessive habits of the old gentry. Sorry for the long answer, but आप बहुत ground cover कर रहे हो, तो I just wanted to reciprocate.
If you want to add anything, Khurram, from your side.
So much food.
I just want to add one thing. In Marathwada, the huge migration happened to the cities, Hyderabad and Gulbarga after police action, of an educated class. And the people who left there are the most poor and who don't have resources, who don't have people to see, whom they should see. These were left people with people who retained back in those places that filled with an anger of an elite who were deserting them. And the new generation which came up, they didn't know what to do with politics, social, cultural thing. They don't have, because all cream of the society is migrated to Hyderabad or Pakistan. So what happened in Marathwada is much worse. What one could even think of also for the longest period of time. So the migration has a very different aspect for Marathwada.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question to Pramod again. Pramod, you have talked about in your article also about the V-Sham and the party alliances that were happening. So in 20th century, in the mid-20th century, you find various alliances, and that will turn into the legal document or to the political framework. You got the Lucknow Pact, you got Mujhe and Ranche Pact, and then you got the Pune Pact, which finally became the part of the Indian Constitution also. So now when you talk about B. Shyam Sundar, and why did his politics fail? Because he was also a faction in Hyderabad, Deccan, talking about the Dalits. So after independence and with the fall of this whole Nizam hierarchy or the state structure, his politics becomes irrelevant. So can you give us a brief, what was the flaw in his, or the framework was not in which he was talking about?
B. Shamsundar is one of the Dalit leader and who supported Azad Hyderabad. Also went to the Paris for an UN to when Nizam sent that sent that committee. He was one of the members. He's a very charismatic leader. He was one of the first graduates of Osmania and first from the Dalits. He worked for a long period of time with Ambedkar, and they started developing difference over the future of state. And also, how do one think of Muslims? So, for Shamsundar, Muslims were a very important group to fight against Hindu or Hindutva kind of an imagination, which was, he thought coming of integration of an Hyderabad state was imposition of an Hindu domination over Dalits. So for his politics, he said even alliance with a minority and minority rule is much more beneficial for a Dalit. So doing that during that short period of time, he did. There was land were granted to Dalits. There were separate schools were given to the Dalits. So a lot of things he tried to extract in that alliance also. But that alliance, one needs to understand there are democratic forces, and I feel that alliance as an idea didn't fail, but that context in which he was trying to play out, that context was not suitable. Context was an Azad Hyderabad, which, if it was a democratic Hyderabad, it would have been possibly more, was potentially more. That idea still has a potential. Like last election, when in Maharashtra, when MIM and Vanchit they came together, you see what kind of mobilization they did in Marathwada. Last Lok Sabha election, not this last, previous one. So that idea has always potential to destabilize the dominance of Hindutva. But I think, but after police action also, it's also important to remember that he continued that politics. He didn't left that politics because he felt it's important. There is also one interesting difference we need to understand when RSS defines who belongs to this land. Particularly, he says who are the Putra Bhumi and Punya Bhumi. So, which means whoever has religious temples and sites from here, they are belonging to here, and categorically excludes Muslims and Christians from that formation. But if you look at Shamsundar, he says Moola Bharati, and he categorically includes Dalit, Muslims, Adivasi, all the suppressed class are part of Mool Bharati and excludes the upper castes. So that politics is still important, and I don't think it's failed. It failed, but also the after partition, everything has changed for a Muslim as a group. Politics as a Muslim politics as an assertive kind of politics that has changed drastically.
We will go to that question once I frame that, because that will be another answer to the question. I will not continue. We will go further up on that. Let me engage with the forum. When you talked about, or we have seen your grandmother's story, there we could find an idea not about hostility or revenge. There is an remembrance. At the same time, there is forgiveness. How do you, because now the politics is like what has happened 1,000 years ago. I will be responsible for that. Namrud what has done, I will be held responsible to that. This is what Babur has done, I will be responsible for that. Or for that matter, what the Nizam has done, I will be responsible for that. So now this is the politics. This is what the morale that is coming out of that. Now you have your grandmother who talks about this whole violence, but we don't find a sense of hostility. Can we explore that point?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there are layers to how one retells and how they recollect these memories. I mean, I would also ask you to grant her the agency to be cognizant that she was speaking on camera. No, I mean, it is a serious business in that sense. Of course, she has told in many times that, you know, जैसा वक्त हमारे को आया दुश्मन को भी नहीं आना, जैसा हम देखे किसको भी नहीं आना. So there is that element of, I mean, the horror of violence, the nature of violence, one would never wish, not even for their enemies. So that nature of forgiveness and the way in that recollection, it is obviously there. But I think it also has to do with the way a person is remembering it. Not like, let's say, even without going into the details of violence sometimes, especially the violence that has happened with women. So men, it is there that they're slaughtered, they're cut, or they're shot, or they're dead, they're burned. But with women, there is so much of violence that has happened. There was so much sexual violence. There was also, they lost their lives to protecting their honor and stuff. But when she tells that, or not simply the case with her, I have interviewed around 24, 25 families across in that Gulbarga, Bidar, that region. So when they say that, there is this sudden change of decibel. The voice itself is a character. It is the information, it has a lot of meaning. I mean, वो जो उसका तजुर्बा है, उस पूरे माहौल का, वो आवाज पे सवार होके आपके सामने आना है. That voice itself is, these are not words that has meaning. So voice itself becomes the symbol that is giving you the gruesomeness of what has happened. So one about forgiveness, yes, I think at least so far those are spoken to, they have not said in that sense, but yes, there are few men I've met, so they have said, okay, what now about it? Why are you coming and asking? Are we going to have some policy? Are we going to have some? So there is, of course, there is a sense of, to get some kind of compensation, to get some kind of recognition for what has happened. One is not asking for a site of memory. One is not asking for like a, one is, but one is in that sense there is there's a demand, but a very small little, like chingari hai, a spark, which they don't want to fan it. They don't want to pick it up for different reasons, one must say, and I think it's for Pramod could add to what I said.
I did a lot of field work, so I have a lot of stories. So one such story is from Latur. So it's again we say Dawan Lavleti where people come, they kill together at one place. There are a series of villages. So one such place, the family fortunately ran away and saw other neighbors and other people were killed. They stayed in Latur and they become little bit materially better off. But after 30 years, after that event, the son of the father who saw it, and his son filed a fake cases just to trouble people who did that, just to trouble, nothing else. So there are different kinds of a response. Not necessarily, it's a forceful forgiveness also. You don't know what to do.
And just to add, not taking your time, he says the very interesting word of forceful forgiveness. So there was one of the servants in the story, from my grandmother, she said. So this person they have witnessed during the act of violence, he's looting the house. Okay? So he's taking things in front of them, like everybody's looting. If we don't colonize, somebody else will. That logic. The Jew logic kind of. So if we don't steal, someone else will. So, sorry, that was a very bad example. I just realized. So, no, what was I saying? Yeah, so the forceful forgiveness. After 2 years of that violence, this guy comes in the home. As if it's a normal day, sun is out, he's here. और हाँ बैठ शंकु, कब आया, इतने दिन हो गया नहीं आया, रोटी डालती हूँ बैठ. And they both are aware of what one has done to each other. There could be multiple ways to respond to that emotion. You see, one could rage with anger, but one responds in a certain way. A forceful forgiveness, or just dealing with it, or is the time bad? Because I think there is the phrase "Waqt sahi nahi tha," and one has become it. The world had taken on itself everything, so nobody was in the right mind. So what is happening there? I think that is why all works and everyone who's sitting who's going to intervene into this subject, those kind of dimensions need to be brought out.
Can I just add one small thing? आप लोग बोले थे कि you specifically said कि one of your subject, I think is your grandmother, said दुश्मन पे भी ये अजाब नहीं लाना. Literally, Umar Farooq Khazi की दादी है, she said the same thing. But it was very stoic. I just want to know what stoic तरीके से बोला. She just said, Allah मियाँ ये दुश्मन पे भी अजाब नहीं लाना.
Indeed.
And emotion नहीं था ना उसमें, not too much emotion, literally. और अभी आप ये भी बोले थे कि वो जो एक कोई अगर नहीं ये घर लूटा या कोई नहीं टेक ओवर करा, मैं ले लूँ. So even with Ayub uncle's grandmother, mother, उन लोग मनसबदार थे अपना तेलंगाना के. So एक मल्लेश बोल के उनके पास काम करने वाला आया था. Him and एक गिरोह आया था उनके घर के सामने, and they said, अम्मा सब जने गांव में घरों को जला रहे हैं, आपको जो भी चाहिए घर से लेके आप निकल जाइए, लेकिन हम लोग घर जलाने वाले हैं और हम लोग नहीं करेंगे, कोई और करेगा. And then his mother then says, मल्लेश तू मेरे लिए काम करता था. और it was like, वो जो mix of subservience और love जो वो नौकरों के साथ जो रहता था उस ज़माने में वैसे ही था. So it's very interesting that you guys said that. So I just want to bring that likeness out.
My question is to again Danish with regard to the belongingness in migration. There are few families or lots of Muslims are migrating to West and also to the other parts of the country.
Post-police action.
Not
Post 1950. Present day.
Right. So how do they identify themselves? Like, how do they see themselves with this? Do they connect themselves, or they are to the modern world with a single entity or an individual entity, not any continuation of their past? So have you ever sensed that in your interview or your timeline into the US or in Canada or in the Gulf?
Actually, the
Hyderabad youth are into that crisis of belongingness.
Again, another
Identity crisis. Identity is very much focused, but the belongingness, the problem is the belongingness.
Again, another very encompassing question. I'll try to keep it short. So, you asked that जो माइग्रेशन जो प्रेजेंट डे में भी हुआ या 80s 90s में भी, अब I kind of alluded to it जब मैं कुछ 5-10 मिनट के लिए बात कर रहा था. हैदराबादी जो हैं अब ना वेस्ट में, they have their associations, या डालस के एक सबब के घर में रूमी टोपी शेरवानियाँ बस, और जो associations जो रहते हैं ना, it's mostly हैदराबादी मुस्लिम्स या तो वो हैदराबादी पाकिस्तानियाँ, city based for the most part, yeah. और उनके बच्चे जो है ना, हाँ घर में खट्टी दाल खाते, राजमा खाते, ये सब करते, but at the same time, beyond having that cuisine at home, association दावत में या कोई family friend या कोई दूसरे American, Canadian या British fellow Hyderabadis first generation, इतना ज़्यादा नहीं है. And if I'm to be very honest, एक Greater Washington area में there's an association. Ultimately, the way I see it, Hyderabadi Pakistanis and just elite city Hyderabadis जो suburbs में अच्छे $1 million के घर हैं, दावत क्या होते? खवाली. I really wish I was doing comedy, but हकीकत बोल रहा हूँ. खवाली करते और शेरवानी रूमी टोपी, and then some people they're just like नहीं मैं ये खरारू पट्टा लाई, मैं हैदराबाद को यहाँ पे गई, नरसिंह के पास के ये कपड़ा लाई, ये सब. So that's kind of what it is.
One last question, and then we will open to the question answers from the audience side. Pramod, you talked about space. When Sardar Patel talks about Hyderabad as an ulcer, if there is an ulcer, you commit a surgical operation on that. Okay? So this is from the side of the other those who have committed this, their imagination. Now the state has vanished, but these words are still there, or a space for answer is still existing, or if it is yes, then are we heading towards for the another surgical operation that yet to become under CNRC or something? This idea of ulcer need to be explored. That I would ask.
I would say idea of an ulcer is it's a very biological and it's very difficult to explain. So I will take it in a little differently. I would say, does hatred exist? And I would say, and does hatred breed on that moment of police action violence from among the Hindus? And I would say it exists there, like it comes up very much in a daily conversations also. Like they would say, "Biyala bhi Muslim thewal nako hota." But that means that even for the seeds, Muslims shouldn't have kept it. Like they saved some good Muslims, now they become a big good number, so they are asserting. So in a conversation, they would say, ki, "We made a mistake, we saved some of you, so we shouldn't have saved." That exists. Even in violence, communal violence, they will bring out police actions. They would say there is a famous place, infamous massacre, it's called Devni. They would say, "Have you forgotten Devni?" So Devni is a place where a huge number of Muslims were killed at one place. It's a very known among that place. So they would say, "Have you forgotten Devni?" So it exists, it continues to exist essentially because there was an impunity granted to it. And people breed on that impunity. They knew that nothing happened to them. When they did that act, nothing happened. And that impunity is a very important, and it comes back to forgiveness. Is it a possible forgiveness? Without impunity, there is no possibility of forgiveness.
Thanks a lot. It was a bit conclusive about the forgiveness and impunity. So, Khurram, would you like to add anything?
No, I'm just
So we
holding
have
the
probably
mic.
come to the question answer from the audience.
We have extra mic.
Extra है पे आप
वो भी दे दो ना.
pass. You can pass these around.
Color mic.
एक है हमारे पास.
Color mic भी दे दो.
हाँ.
So the thing is that
This.
so we can see that there is a systematic forgetting about what happened during the 1948, especially both Marxist and nationalist historians. They had their own reasons not to speak about this massacre. So this, I think, K.M. Munshi, who served as the Governor General for a long time, and he never in his memoir, never ever mentions about this Operation Polo or the police action. So my question is that obviously when we comes to, Khurram talked about this trauma and all, so there is something called this post-traumatic literature. Like people will be writing what has happened to them to get a kind of recovery, a kind of this literature will be a cathartic vehicle. So Pramod mentioned about some of the songs there. So obviously I feel that there will be something written as well. So I'm not from Hyderabad, I am from Kerala. But last year I had one of the course on the cities. So at that time I came across two dramas which were written by two women who migrated to Pakistan after this Operation Polo, and that was in Urdu, and I don't know Urdu. So I was unable to explore much about that. So obviously there will be this post-traumatic literature. So have you come across any such kind of writings, or are there any existing scholarship going on that? And one more question, that is that, so Danish mentioned about the migration. So all of, as far as in this discussion, I feel that all of you are working on the micro-histories from those who are here in Hyderabad. Obviously, there are people who migrated to Pakistan also after this Operation Polo. So they will also be having the stories. So like Danish said, this has to be collected or recollected within 5 or 10 years. So is there any ongoing scholarship in Pakistan or some other places on the this trauma of the Operation Polo? That's it.
Post-traumatic related.
For Marathi, I can tell you very openly. There is one autobiographical essay written by a very brilliant poet about police action and me. It's an autobiographical essay. Apart from that, there are certain poems which I came across, and I don't think there is anything else about which talks about post-police action violence and trauma or something. But there is a lot more thing one need to explore. I couldn't do that. It's a songs of mourns.
Okay.
Because songs of mourns, it's a songs of mourning, and there were no public mourning or there is no time to grieve, because the surviving was a very important step. What next is a very important. There is everything is gone. You need to look for food. So the fighting instant was very important. So lot of these mourning happen in these Muharram songs. There are I have one song. I couldn't get many of those kinds of. But I'm sure there are many people who used to sing. That I came across from many people who used to say that police action as a Karbala Sani. So they have a lot of songs of Muharrams and police action. One needs to explore more. And Urdu, I came across at least 4 to 5 novels which speaks about, one could say. And hardly, I don't think anything is there in Kannada. I don't know about Telugu, but that is there. And fortunately, Mohit sir is here and he has worked extensively on this part. One of the rare person who worked very scholarly on this work. One should read his essay in Anveshi. Is one of the brilliant essays that explains, talks about why people kept silence. Silence because everyone was in mourning, everyone knew that he had the same sorrow as my sorrow. So the only going ahead was to keep that silence. He explains and he writes so well. One should read that essay, Violence and Silence, and other his work as well.
Brother, what's your name?
Shaheen.
Shaheen. Thank you for your good question. It reminds me that back in January, एक वायर के लिए एक piece लिखा था मैं. It was Afsar Muhammad who wrote a book on 1948, Reimagining history. आपका जो सवाल था, are there any other, micro-histories or these oral accounts? The thing is, police action के बाद, a lot of people were just afraid to talk about it, especially Muslims. And in Afsar Muhammad's book, he quotes Vara Lakshmi, an Urdu and a bilingual Urdu Telugu writer. She says in that book, literature, Urdu ho ya Telugu, short stories, fiction, non-fiction memoirs, told better understanding, retold what happened during and after police action better than what newspapers did. और newspaper और journalism को क्या कहा जाता? First draft of history. So if you want something very early in Urdu and Telugu, आप literature देखिए, journalism में ज़्यादा मत देखिए. If to see what happened during and after police action. And I think briefly I also mentioned 2016, 2017 में these micro-histories have started to come out, but it's been mostly Punjab, Sindh, North India, Bengal based. Hyderabad के बारे में, the thing is to get these stories out specifically into English, it requires a certain amount of crafting. It's not just about writing and researching. It's not a question of writing or important hai ya research important hai. Those are two very important prerequisites. From my experience, and my editor, Trust me, I've learned and grown as a writer a lot. Sabko karna chahiye aisa. I feel the thing is, Hyderabad mein kya hai? I mean, with these guys, mashallah se, things have started to come out a little more. But the thing is that ये जो North India, Punjab, Bengal, Sindh के बारे में जो narratives निकले हैं, they've been crafted. People have worked with editors. And the editor is not somebody who's done the research. He or she will help you craft the story ताकि wider audiences, well-read audiences और mainstream publishers के लिए मुनासिब हो ये material. I feel like, Hyderabad में we can be a little too insular at times. अपने वो बोलते ना एक ही कुएं का मेंढक. I feel like when it comes to writing and disseminating, not the researching and finding stories, we're good with that. Now we're finally catching on to get those stories, but to make them a little more, I don't want to say palatable for the mainstream, because mainstream is also, distorting history. But at the same time, to, ensure that it's more readable for a lot of English readers, we have to improve on that a little bit, and we have to work with more seasoned people who if I'm to be honest, you won't find those editors, people who can craft the story, not research, but help you give the story more shape. So that's I'll give you some, and lastly I'll give you some examples of good Urdu and Telugu novels. Even though I don't read Telugu, but I've come across, Vatigota Alvar Swami, Dodda Narsaya, and they're not necessarily, against Muslims. Even Dodda Narsaya, a story jo translate karwaya tha main, he talks, it is very anti-Nizam, but then it does become anti-Congress later. So my suggestion is, if anybody wants to do research on police action, Urdu for a lot of, Muslim-centric stories, and leftist ones as well. And if you want to get the actual guerrillas, the people who really fought on the ground against first the Nizam's forces, and then the Indian Army, Telugu literature is the way to go. Thank you. I hope that answers your question. Anything? Well, also, Ibrahim Jali's ki Do Mulk Ek Kahani, brilliant novel.
Yeah, that's what my grandfather was no more.
Brilliant novel. Memoir, sorry.
Yeah, my question is to Pramod sir. You mentioned about the counter narrative from the Hindu side. So, whatever the narrative was there, so it was. You mentioned that they said that it was retaliation towards Razakar's actions. So, was it a collective response, or there was some difference of opinion, no, this side also did that and that side also did that? Was there any difference, or same collective response was there?
When we speak of a police action, one needs to keep in mind that there were violence at two different kinds of violence. First, when military entered, and along the military there is a series of violence. And after that, for 1.5 years, there are continuous different intensity, but there is a continuous attacks on Muslims. So when we speak of one may, was there Razakar's violence was there? Yes, there was some places in Marathwada, there was Razakar. There's no need to deny. But that doesn't justify killing of another people, because you fought against a certain kind of principles and values. You can't do the same thing when you come into the power. So it cannot be justified by saying कि रज़ाकार का reaction वगैरह होगा. It might be there for it immediately. So even if we discount for a moment, let's discount when military enter with military violence, people might have reacted in a certain places. That violence is there, but the much larger scale violence happened after under the military rule. So that is much more concern and serious, and much more the scale is much higher in that period. So that is not at all, even if we say as a reaction, it's not a reaction, it's a very planned, cold-blooded kind of thing. If we listen narratives of people, you will understand that they are staying together, suddenly they decide and suddenly they bring them together, ask them to come together and they kill. So it's a very plan kind of an
Yeah, I just wanted to know whether it was like collective psyche of the people that the narrative they gave in reaction. Like we did violence because they Razakars were violent. So the narrative from the other side, it was like collective reaction or like just some people were reacting.
Marathwada is a space where Arya Samaj was much more,
Okay.
and we don't bring that into the story. And I don't think it's a collective psyche or something, because a lot of Hindu people told about massacres. Hindu people themselves, in my own field work, and they are also telling all kinds of stories. So it's not, one cannot homogenize by saying it's a psyche of an whole instance, but I am sure it's an Arya Samaj rooted much. It's a very collective, organized act, and that organized act is the Arya Samaj. There were RSS groups were also there, certain parts, and even state congress was part.
Yeah. State congress that I discussed earlier. State congress that we won't discuss about that. Hyderabad State Congress, if you go to the archives and just look at the writings of Swaminathan Tirth, kind of argument he is writing to Nehru and Sardar Patel saying that recognize us as a chapter of the Indian National Congress. Central leadership says that no, we won't recognize you as our chapter because of these activities. So that is unexplored part. Now even I have that document also wherein there was two reports. The Velodi, he is the chief administrator of the military administrator. That is a secret document on flag hosting was there on January 1950. So secret notice goes from Velodi to the KM Munshi that you need to be disclosed to the Sardar Patel. So he says that everything is fine, but two things has happened. One is the absence of the state Hyderabad Congress people on flag hosting. Absence. The Hyderabad State Congress leadership is absent on that day. And second is that assassination attempt on the Nizam of Hyderabad. Now someone says that Nizam has read two poetic couplets about the merger on the very next, and we find in the archive saying that there was assassination attempt, and he comes from the Marathi background. So the detonator was there and he tried to throw, but it did not happen, and he says that I was waiting for this event for 2 years. So now the state Hyderabad Congress is not being discussed. Even here also we are not discussing that. So that is somewhere we need to discuss what kind of creature was this Hyderabad State Congress.
I'll just respond. First thing is there was an assassination attempt on Nizam. He is right. The second thing what he said about the absence, that absence was because State Congress wanted Nizam not to be recognized as a Rajpramukh, because they were against, they felt that it gave legitimacy to Nizam. So that's a much more debated than discussed today. So within State Congress, there were lot of conflict was happening. One of the points of conflict was, if you go through the archive material, you will find that B. Ramakrishna Rao and Desai and Gosavi, that group is there. So the Desai group is, Gosavi is a Swami Ramananda and Desai is an opposition to that. So they are constantly saying that there are series of evidences against Congress members who participated in criminal activities. You need to remove them. That was also part of a power struggle also. But one point this comes up repetitively. They are also presenting cases where, which case, like there's the one person called D.L. Pathak from Aurangabad. He actually gave the list of cases where Congress activists were participating in police action and all that. So you find a lot more material on that. So Congress, Center Congress was not sure what to do with this conflict. So they took a long time to decide which Congress is legitimate or not. Or they tried to make compromise between them. So that kind of a conflict, that's a long story.
Yeah, we are going to conclude the session. Do you have any final words to say? So thank you for the panelists to share your valuable knowledge and at the same time to receive our invitation and spend your time here and brief us about your research and also for. And also I would say this was a purposeful, we selected the audience as a young audience because in the morning session it was the people who have already established their career in the journalism and they brought some new perspectives from their life experiences. And these people, they are in their late 20s, 30s or they will bring another perspective.
Mid-30s, please.
Late 20s, I would say. Because so they will bring new perspectives and they will be more dynamic or I would say radical in their thought, which we do need to understand this dynamics of state and subjects and people. Thanks a lot and thank you for giving me an opportunity to be a moderator.